Tai pirmiausia, sveiki atvykę, gerbiamas Lena, Mr. President. Welcome. Can you hear me? Yes. So I am Radvilė Morkūnaitė Mikulėnienė, Chair of European Affairs Committee. Unfortunately, I cannot be present at Seimas today. Actually, it's already for a week that I have to stay at home due to my...
Negaliu būti šiuo metu Seime dėl sveikatos problemų, šiek tiek koščių. Na, suprantate, pandemija ir visos kitos bėdos. Dėkoju už jūsų vizitą. Tikiuosi, kad jau įvyko daug produktyvių susitikimų. Man iš tiesų malonu matyti mūsų atstovą Rimantą Šadžių ir be abejo mūsų kolegą valstybės kontrolierių Mindaugą Macijauską. Taip pat poną Balčytį, kurį daugumą iš jūsų jau puikiai pažįstate, nes dirbote Europos parlamente. Aš pati, kai dirbau Europos parlamente, jūs puikiai pamenu. Manau, kad kai kurie iš mūsų kolegų dalyvaus posėdį.
So I would like to hear what you have to say to Lithuanians, how to improve our work. I know that this information that you share with the member states is more of a more broader sense, and especially what interests us, of course, situation in Ukraine, and most importantly now the issues related with migration. So we perfectly know what challenges we face here in Lithuania and in Latvia and in Poland, and that we would have this wish for strengthening Frontex and to have better and stronger response in these kind of events that we are experiencing from Belarus side. So as we call it, we do not call it migration crisis, we call it hybrid attack, and we expect that EU will help us to react in a proper way, and we are helpful already for the European Union and for member states, but this is the other issue. So I would like then if Mr. Balčytis would like to add something, and then to give a floor to you, because you are the most important person today here. Thank you.
Thank you. May I thank everyone who are present both here in the hall and online. Your work is of crucial importance, not only for Lithuania, but for the entire European Union. From my experience as a member of the European Parliament, I always knew that we are being looked by the European Union, that we are being monitored on how we spend the money. We are a small country, indeed. And during the meeting of the Committee on Audit, we had a meeting with the Speaker of the Lithuanian Parliament and talked about the challenges that we are greatly concerned of. They include the protection of our borders, the migration policy. I believe that the European Union will have to adopt the decisions later on that will change the approach to the asylum policy and migration policy in the EU. Today, however, I believe that it is important to talk about the further integration of Ukraine when it comes to its future, as well as the future of other Eastern European countries. We do appreciate the huge work that is being conducted by the European Court of Auditors by supervising the Lithuanian National Audit Office. And we would like to thank you, together with Mr. Rimantas Šadžius. I can assure you that we have maintained close contacts with our national representative in the European Court of Auditors. So, indeed, I do appreciate the work. I thank you for the work, and I hope that the cooperation will remain close in the future as well.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say thank you to both chairs for the opportunity to speak here and to have a thorough discussion about common interests and actual political and audit developments. We appreciate that very much. I remember that Rimantas and myself had been here in the same room among those two committees a few years ago. It was one of the most interesting discussions I ever had with parliamentary committees from national parliaments. And looking forward we have now about 1 hour or something like that for quite as well interesting discussions. Rimantas and myself have distributed a little bit the tasks. So I will say a little bit more general about the role of the European Court of Auditors, the problems that we are actually facing, the support that we need from the national parliaments as well. And then Rimantas will go a little bit more into the specificities that have been mentioned as well by you, Chair, and which are quite of actual political interest here in Lithuania, and that are as well connected to certain reports that we have just delivered. Ukraine was already mentioned, but there are other reports as well. So our role is quite clear. We are the smallest of the 7 constitutional institutions of the European Union as being the external auditor, but we think that we are quite important, and we have increased our relevance, I think, over the last years quite a lot. Actually, we are doing the statement of assurance. That means the annual report where we deliver a general opinion on the overall budget of the European Union. This is mandatory. This is our duty following the treaty. But in addition to that, we are as well actually delivering between 30 and 40 so-called special reports, which are in fact performance reports that concentrate on actual issues from which we believe that it is of interest for the public as well as of our stakeholders to know if the policies that are behind these special reports really have delivered. So if at the end that what is expected by spending money or by doing something at the end had been really achieved. And we have more or less doubled these performance reports over the last years. By the way, it's a development that is not only happening on the level of the European Court of Auditors, that happens nearly in every supreme audit institutions. They are more focusing on performance than on the classical compliance aspect, simply due to the fact that if you take a look all over, the compliance situation has improved over the last decades. It's still not perfect, but it has improved. And of course, politicians, stakeholders, the public more and more wants to know what kind of success certain policies have and how good they are, and how successful they are and what they really deliver. So this is our role. We have, as I said, around 900 people working for us. 600 of them are doing audit. The others are the usual support staff. But we are now facing a completely new situation. We do not only have the MFF to audit, which is more or less in the same volume like it was over the last 7 years, a little bit more, but more or less it's the same. But in addition to that, we have now this new instruments of the NGEU and especially the RRF. And of course, it is not possible to do the same quality and quantity of audit that we had done in the past if the EU budget is more or less doubled in a very short time, even if it is a limited time for 4 to 6 years, but it is de facto doubled. And so we have asked the budgetary authority to give us a small number of additional resources, 40 positions, temporary positions for that time during we have to audit as well the NGEU. The Commission has not done that. The Commission has only approved 7 from those 40 demanded. The Council, which is the usual reaction of the Council at the beginning of the negotiations, always the usual reaction, has reduced it to 0. Parliament will probably come up to our demands, but then there will be the difficult negotiations between Council and Parliament on the final budget. And we are, of course, when we are now traveling around and speak with national governments, we ask them to support our demand because we believe that it is our duty and that NGEU and RFF must be successful. And they can only be successful if there is some kind of control. We as well mentioned that, of course, when we meet with national parliaments, because national parliaments still have the opportunity to ask their government and their ministers and to press them a bit in this direction. I think it's in the interest of everyone that we have the opportunity to do serious audit on this new part of the overall EU budgetary structures. Stakeholders, by the way, are not only the European Parliament and the Council, it's as well the national parliaments. So when we travel around, all of our members, but as well as I'm being president in one or the other member state, we always try to meet and to speak with the national parliaments. We want to listen to them. We want to have what kind of ideas they have. So we are as well open for wishes. We receive normally from the European Parliament between 100 and 150 proposals each year for areas where we should do performance audits. More and more, the member states are doing the same. So there are council formations that do exactly the same and ask us with concrete proposals to do this or that. And of course, if there would be a concrete proposal coming from a national parliament or a committee, we would as well think about, we are independent to take a decision what we audit, but we of course would seriously think about to put this into our working program. So I can offer to you that as well, if you have specific wishes or ideas, and the discussions that we had already this morning with the Prime Minister, with the President, as well as with the Speaker of Parliament and with the two chairs I have met this morning, shows that there are a lot of questions, for example, the future of Schengen and other aspects that could play an important role and that in our future working programs and that are of strong interest for Lithuania. So that's what I could say at the beginning as a kind of introduction, and for the specificities, I would now like to pass the floor, if you agree, Chair, to Rimantas. Please, Rimantas.
Thank you, members of the committees, Mr. Chairs. Usually, when I present the activities of the European Court of Auditors, I usually use some visual material. I do not have it now, which means that I will be very brief in my presentation. If you think that some reports are very interesting, we will be able to come back to them, and I am ready to present those reports to each committee individually. Although auditors are not the most favorable people in various areas, be it a public sector or a private sector, but it can't be said that the work of auditors does not bring any concrete results. So I'll mention one of the results now. One of the objectives why we have come to Vilnius is to participate in the conference to be held on Friday. The conference was a result from the result of the audit of the European Court of Auditors. I have introduced that flagship project. I introduced it to the Committee on European Affairs in the Lithuanian Parliament. One of our recommendations was, as we were building this building, to start from small bricks. That is to start with the extension of local capital markets in member states and to try to expand this process in regions. So the conference to be held on Friday will discuss ways and means how to develop capital markets in the Baltic market. Baltic countries are members of the European Union, each of them being very small and too small to expect vitality of capital markets in each country, but when acting together, those three Baltic countries can develop ecosystems, risk capitals, or share capital ways, or that are complementary to bank financing. I therefore invite you to join this conference, as it will be broadcast live. It will be held in the Hotel Lietuva. So this is one of the objectives of our visit. The questions that were raised during during the debate has already been mentioned by President Klaus Heiner-Lehne. So one of the issues was the migration issue. Quite recently, we have published the report on the readmission of migrants and the situation of migrants. We saw that the European map is rather diverse. There are many member states, there are many countries into which migrants have to be returned after they are refused the status of a migrant. But it seems that there are some countries which have individual agreements with third countries on readmission. Sometimes these agreements are ignored. So we see that one of the lessons in this area, one of the areas, is that cooperation at the EU level and common European action would help solve the problem. That is why we need to have a common position both on the part of the European Union and on the part of the legislators. One of the legislators of the EU is the Council, in which the new Migration Management Pact has stalled, which was offered by the European Commission back in the earliest years. The President of the Commission, Madam von der Leyen, has recently said in the European Parliament that it was necessary to complete the most urgent works, and that this work entails very many hurdles. When it comes to the EU institutions themselves, we have noticed that there are drawbacks in the activity of the External Action Service. Therefore, this was one of the motives in the work program to include the audit of the External Action Service in the coming program of the European Court of Auditors. As you know, this institution is governed by Joseph Borrell. This institution is of crucial importance. It has a lot of important functions to fulfill. We have noticed that these functions have not been exercised effectively. We have conducted the audit of Frontex as well. It was very effective. And I have a suspicion that this was one of the things why Frontex decided to respond so rapidly to the hybrid attacks that Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland faced with. Today, you've heard from the Lithuanian representatives the words of appreciation towards the work of Frontex. I believe that I presented this report to the Committee on European Affairs as well. There are some issues that still need to be addressed, but we are very happy that the leadership of Frontex agreed with the recommendations that were given to them and agreed to its rapid implementation. Another agency with the work of which we audit is the Europol. We audit the work of Europol related to fighting trafficking of irregular migrants. I can't present the results of this report precisely because it will be published tomorrow. Once it is published, I will be ready to present the results to the members of the Lithuanian Parliament. In conclusion, the audit of this agency, as well as we conducted audits of other agencies, we noticed some systemic problems. These problems often are repeated when it comes to migration problems. So once political decision is taken to expand the mandate of the agency, and to provide more opportunities to employ more people. As you know, Frontex is planning in the coming future to employ 1,000 of people And this is a truly huge number. Huge funding is given to those agencies, but it seems that those boring, repetitive hurdles in the activities of the agency, inability to conduct public procurement, lack of prospective ways to attract people and to ensure that people are employed, usually poses problems. This happened both previously, this happens now. This happened to the European Asylum Support Office. There were quite many problems, and with the help of the European Court of Auditors and my personal effort, the situation has become normal, and this very important agency that participates in the management of migration is finally starting to work effectively. When it comes to the management to those agencies, I have already told you that decision-making at the EU level is very problematic because member states participate in the decision-making with their different approaches, different views. This makes the decision-making very slow. Member states have a lot of functions to fulfill, and then if the agency, the management of the agency is given to the member states, the activity of this agency is hindered. One of the specific examples already from another field is the organization management system of the European Banking Authority. This authority is responsible to fighting money laundering. There are some obvious examples, and we noticed that quite recently. We made the audit on the money laundering in the banking sector. The report has been published. So we noticed that this agency failed to initiate the infringement procedure in the European Union because the Observer Council decided otherwise. That's why we collected some written evidence that the representatives were manipulated, which means that when fighting problems that are relevant to all Europe, the division of competences among the member states hinders and sometimes blocks adopting decisions. Therefore, we offered to centralize the management of fighting of money laundering. By the way, the European Commission proposed that such agencies should be established, and we proposed that the management of such agencies should be depoliticized, just like in the case of the Single Resolution Board, which is responsible, in which the decisions are taken by members. Such mechanism would work more efficiently. But in order to set this mechanism, the will of EU member states is needed. Therefore, when reforming the management of such agencies, the European Commission proposals were not welcomed by the Council. I also talked about this problem at the Committee on European Affairs of the Lithuanian Parliament. The Committee on European Affairs gives mandate on the position of the Republic of Lithuania. I therefore call on you to think very carefully, but I would highly recommend that you consider consider that the European problems could be solved without dividing the mandate to the European member states. Quite recently, we also published the report on fighting grand corruption in Ukraine. Well, in fact, about the failures on fighting grand corruption in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is a sovereign country. It has to address its own problems on your own. However, EU institutions have much influence on Ukraine, especially the financial influence, as the European Union has allocated some microfinancial support for its various programs. When we allocated the support, there was an agreement concluded between the EU and Ukraine. This agreement established certain conditions. For example, in order to give the free visa regime for Ukraine's, 3 requirements were established. However, only one of them was implemented. So when we have faced with quite a few problems when we provide some support, but no one comes to audit how this support was distributed and whether it was used efficiently. We do want to reduce the influence of third countries, but to the opinion of the European Court of Auditors, the authority of the European Union and the authority of the support of the EU might be compromised because we cannot reach the results that we desire. The day after the report was presented, the Ukraine adopted the document on fighting, on the measures to fighting corruption in Ukraine. But we don't know how this law will be implemented in the future. But well, we still were happy that such law was adopted because it was an impetus for a change. I am ready to present this report in detail because it contains quite a lot of details. It is worth reading. I can say that Ukraine is the country that belongs to the Eastern Partnership countries, and it is very, as a country, interesting for the Lithuanian government and for the Committee on European Affairs. I'll finish at that. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I hope that we will be able to answer them very frankly and sincerely. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I don't know how we should pursue. I don't see the colleagues who are joining us by remote mode. Is there anyone who would like to react? Maybe our ombudsman would like to join the discussion? Yes, if I may. Mr. Chair, I think you should take initiative. This is my opinion, and if we have any other requests, we will let you know. I believe that the Committee on European Affairs should be the one raising questions. This is why we have our high-level guests here today, and I believe that Mr. Mindaugas Macijauskas probably should also have a word or two about the situation in Lithuania and how the audit matters could be improved, or how the cooperation with the European Court of Auditors could be boosted, if that's okay. Yes, of course. Maybe colleague Mindaugas first, and then the other members of the committee will join. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to see the President of the European Court of Auditors for the second time in Lithuania already. And what he mentioned in his introduction, I think will also be discussed tomorrow during our visit to National Audit Office, how we could contribute to finding solution to the migrant crisis and other relevant issues. All this is on our working table. We are going to discuss them and hopefully present our proposals a bit later. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your introduction, for presenting the reports and your observations. I believe that the issue of migration is the most relevant in Lithuania today. And what Mr. Rimantas Šadžius mentioned regarding the problems linked to Migration Pact is quite obvious. Lithuania is willing to speak about the aspects of hybrid war and probably some changes to cope with the migration, not just within the context of the Migration Pact, but also other aspects. Because this is the phenomenon, the problem that may last for a couple of years, actually. It's a complex issue. The report regarding readmission cooperation is extremely useful because this is probably the document giving the information how different institutions work and cooperate among themselves. We are happy about the activities of Frontex, as mentioned before. However, we happen to hear different evaluations as far as Frontex involvement is concerned. Probably there are two sides. On the one hand, the efficiency and funding, and on the other hand, how much, to what level, to what extent Frontex is able to secure our borders. Speaking about international commitments, maybe you could also elaborate a little bit more based on the recommendations. What else could be improved? I understand this is quite a wide matter. We shouldn't limit ourselves talking just about the adequate resources, but maybe how you see the management of migration, the overall system that we have today, and what changes are required to make it more effective. The second side of the matter is, of course, related to the existing legislation rather than technical matters. Mrs. Chair, maybe it would be wise to collect all the questions and then we could try to answer them. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I cannot see people willing to ask questions on the screen. Marius, are you willing to ask a question? Maybe I could, if you may. When we had a visit with the speaker of the Seimas, and a bit later, you mentioned the problem related to the activities of the External Action Service. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the main institution here that has a big role in each member state. So maybe you could also point out at the biggest problems related to European Union External Action Service, because it is quite an important organization. One of its functions is the indirect management of Frontex. and also other challenges that European Union is facing today? That is my question.
Okay, if you agree, I just start and then I leave at the end for to Imantas to add if there's still something to add. So first, Frontex. My feeling is that, of course, we had criticized the dysfunction of Frontex quite massively in our report. But this is not due to the fact that there is a complete inability to do something. This is simply due to the fact that this agency had been enlarged massively in a very, very, very short time. So if you have an agency that before the decision and before the new tasks that have been given to them had 700 people, and then you decide that it should have 10,000 people, and you have to enlarge it within a very, very short time, I think every agency, every institution would face problems that they cannot solve in short time, that simply need a certain time to be solved and to be developed in some way. This is completely clear. So at the end, when I heard, and I checked that yesterday, how active Frontex is actually here in Lithuania, I think this is already a good sign that beside the darkness that we have described in the report, there's as well light. Yeah, and I think that has to be seen. Of course, regarding the quality, they could be all better, but that something is happening and that they are so active, this is already quite a good sign and shows that they are now even able to react in quite a short time. So it did not need years that something happened. It happened quite soon. And this I see quite positive. And it's as well the role of the Court of Auditors, not only to see the critical aspects, but as well, if there are good aspects, to describe the good aspects. And I'm happy to hear that there is now a positive impact and certain things are developing in the right direction. I agree as well, and this was discussion this morning with President and with Prime Minister, that of course the simple fact that the actual legislation on Schengen is limited to the relations between the Schengen and non-Schengen states within the EU structure is as well a problem. So I agree, and I think this is as well very, very right, that if a member state has borders in relation to third countries that are not part of the EU, then he is protecting, or this member state is protecting the interests of the Union as such at its borders. So there is quite a logic behind that the EU as such should take care of that. So that's something what we have taken with us, and we will probably think about having in one of our next working programs a report on Schengen in general, but as well within this report on Schengen, taking a look at this specific problem. And that was quite an interesting information we took with us this morning after discussion on the migration aspects here. Another problem, of course, that has to be solved politically that we cannot solve. This is the simple fact that there is now more or less about a year, a concrete proposal on the table of the EU Council of Ministers to take a decision on migration routes. And this is still blocked, but I can only tell you that it will be addressed, of course, in the next summit of the leaders in October. That's what I have heard from your president this morning. And if you take a look at the speech that Ursula von der Leyen has delivered as the State of Union address, this was on a very, very high level within the speech. So hopefully there will be a political development, and how far we can support this with our reports and with discussions, of course we can do, but we are not taking the decision. The decision is taken by the political level. In this case, especially the difficulties are within the Council. The readmission problem shows, and this is just one of the lot of examples where you could see the big advantage of having something like the External Action Service, because the External Action Service acts on behalf of the EU, and in economic terms, the EU is a superpower. It's probably the superpower on the world, in the world. So there they have instruments and they have arguments that they could use to at the end to have progress on certain aspects like that. Okay, you are now facing the difficulties, for example, with Belarus, but others were facing with the European Union for a long time. It's very similar difficulties in relation to Northern African states. Algeria, Morocco is just another example. And there again, even a large member state like the one that I know best is not able to find solutions alone. But if the EU as such acts, the chances that things could be improved are much better. And of course, everything that helps to move the External Action Service in the direction that they as well have to deal with issues like that, and that they cannot simply say this is a problem of a certain specific member state. They have to see that this is a problem of the EU as such. There, I believe that there could be progress, and what we can do with our reports to put a stronger focus on these aspects. I think that is what we are trying to do. And this will especially help smaller member states like Lithuania that have strong problematic borders with third countries outside of the Union. So Remantas, I do not know if I've forgotten something, but please add.
What I would like to add is still another aspect, which is also quite important, speaking about Lithuania's position. When we led our representatives to the Council of Europe, is the matter of information. One of the shortcomings, the problems that we're facing is on speaking about migration readmission or illegal transportation, or in the fight with money laundering, is that on one hand, the flows of information are too slow among member states because it involves a lot of member states and their institutions. And the second thing is that information is too often not properly prepared. It originates from different sources. And in this case, the European Commission services have a difficulty in drawing conclusions. The exchange is too slow. And the worst thing is when we come across jealousy, which we, let's say, witnessed in financial market exchange issue, when member states refused information from market participants. Let's say the European Union Insurance and Pension Agency needs information. It has to send a request to the institution within the relevant institution within the country, grounding the request, explaining why it needs it, be it migration management or anti-money laundering. The problems seem to be very similar. And we see that we have some gaps in the legislation of the EU when discussing the matter and trying to come to a compromise among the member states. So probably here we deal with improperly perceived national interest. The information within the institutions also does not seem to be of equal quality, of equal level. This is a practical matter, which, as I mentioned, may be linked to the legal obstacles, but there are also practical things, practical recommendations that have to be implemented by concrete institutions. And the fact that the European Court of Auditors has reproached those institutions is really useful, because this is something to draw attention to the fact that to the problems that need to be reviewed. So the information problem is another matter which I would like to draw your attention to, also for Lithuania, when Lithuanian ministers are going to meetings of the council. Thank you. If I may, it's primarily aimed at my self-education, perhaps. when we have the evaluation of the fund use, it is interesting to know, looking at your reports regarding EU fund management. My question is there any correlation? Let's say, if we look at RRF or your previous recommendations, are they still in force? Or are you only telling in the final stage whether the funds have been used properly or not?
I think as a supreme audit institution, we are not doing impact assessment. Of course, when there are crucial changes of the or amendments to the financing system of the EU, then we have to give an opinion. That's even foreseen in regulations, the treaty, a lot of other legal routes. But we are very careful in delivering these opinions, because what we want to avoid is that we come into a situation where we at the end have to audit the results of our own advisors. Yeah, so that's something that should be avoided. We are ex post auditor. That means we take a look after the things have happened, and then we give an opinion on this issue. One of the big problems of many accounting firms in the past was that at the end they were auditing their own advice and their own counseling that they did before. That's something that we should never do. So we are quite careful in doing impact assessment or in delivering opinion. Sometimes we do this, but in a very, very limited way. Our role is more ex post, but even this ex post gives them, the legislator, the administration, the chance to improve the rules for the next time. That's what we really want to do. And of course, the simple fact that we do ex post audit, as well as a kind of support role for those that have to take the decisions on using the money to do it the right way. Because they are always afraid that we may go there and that we detect something that is not good and that we may make it public. So this is a general deterrence that simply gets out of the function of a supreme audit institution. So this is helpful as well. So I think this is more or less the description of our role. So what we don't do, we both made this experience when we had been in the Coreper a few months ago. The Coreper has invited us. The Coreper, the working group, or the ambassadors at the EU that are probably one of the most important structures within the council structure, and that prepare all decisions of council and which have a crucial role. And they, of course, discussed with us, NGU and RRF, and there was, I don't say which ambassador it was, but there was one ambassador, even two more. One was very clear, who asked us, can you give us an opinion what we could do and what we could not do? Yeah, and I think this is impossible. This is something that we cannot do. That is not our role. So at the end, the funny thing is that the council regarding NGU and RRF is suddenly not only being legislator anymore, it has become as well an administrative function. And this administrative function, of course, has to be audited at a later stage by us. So, and what they now, or what this specific ambassador, or those three specific ambassadors wanted from us was more or less, before they take a decision, a declaration that everything is fine. We are unable to do that. That's quite clear. At the end, when they have taken the decision, then of course we can do an audit and can say, okay, the conditions have been fulfilled, the targets and milestones have been achieved, and things like that, but not before. So this, to make that very clear, we are not part of the legislative or political process. We are, of course, an indirect part in delivering ex post opinion. So that's just to make some kind of understanding of our role. Yeah.
What I could add is that there is one similarity between the multi-annual financial framework funds and also the new next generation initiative or plan. This is the problem which has been discussed widely, and that is use of funds, accumulation of funds. And member states, some of the member states, seem to have difficulty with this, to absorb the funds. And one of the big risks is that one member state that has never received very big funds based on cohesion program, now on the basis of the new program is going to receive the biggest amount of funding. So this is something we usually draw attention to when presenting our opinion, that some safeguards are required. It has to be stated that the country must be ready, and the commission that is looking into the quality of the plan, also the control systems and features, needs to look very carefully at this aspect of fund absorption. Because if the member state is not able to absorb the funds, the whole, well, a large part of economic sense of the instrument disappears. This is one of the lessons. This is why now we are engaged in analysis how the European Commission has been analyzing RRF plans. We don't yet have the results. They will be publicized, and I wouldn't like to present some intermediate results, but the objective fact is that since the data is public, there have been 11 criteria based on which the European Commission had to evaluate the plans from A to D. Can you guess what evaluation has been received? With the exception of one criteria, all the countries were evaluated as A. And it may be that this is the fact. The Commission has been working a lot with the member states, and it tried to look at those plans quite carefully in the process. I know that this was the case in Lithuania as well. A lot of work has been put, a lot of effort has been actually put into this work from the administrations, by the administrations of the member states. The monitoring and control systems in all member states, even though the Commission has also given some remarks, all the countries got the evaluation A. This is what the European Audit Institution can do, speaking about the evaluation of the work of the Commission. We would find it difficult to enter a member state and start criticizing the government or authorities of that particular country. But again, here we have some semi-secret plan in the future to cooperate with National Audit Office, authority of member states. The President has already mentioned that we have the contact committee that unites the national audit authorities, 27 member states, and the committee is going to consider how efforts of all the national audit institutions could be united. This is an urgent work that needs to be done. And the other one is that the funds that come into member states are used for targeted purposes based on the legislation, existing legislation. This is what we are going to do. Madam Chair, if I may just maybe I can ask the European Court of Auditors, my colleague Rimantas also, because we have been talking about public procurement for a number of years. The European Union is spending millions every year, but we still face big problems with public procurement. We together, including Mindaugas Macijauskas, who are going to check, use resources again. Don't you think that the European Court of Auditors could contribute in evaluating preparedness of some member states? This is a complex question, but I imagine that it is the right time. When some time ago we had the same opinion about Frontex, external borders, even though we had the crisis when Spain and Italy were flooded by migrants a few years ago, we have been sort of waiting for something else to happen, and now we have the situation with Belarus. I think it is high time to think in a complex way, that the country needs to be ready, and that the good practice experience of other countries can be applied, because some experience is in place already. So this is probably my opinion, my wish, because I believe that this would really facilitate the work of many institutions.
Okay, public procurement. I remember that we had done something on this a long time ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There was a report on this issue, and of course I still remember it from my time in the European Parliament. Because in those 20 years we already had 2 reforms of public procurement, and to be very frank, I do not think that the result of this legislative work has improved. Yeah, so it is still extremely complicated. It produces a lot of difficulties, and later in the other function, in the Supreme Audit Institution, it became obvious that because of the way how these rules are, how complicated they are, automatically there is a high level of error. And in general, if you read our annual report, you will find always the same sentence somewhere, that we are asking for simpler and easier rules, because especially in the areas where we have high error rates, one of the key reasons for this high error rates are the rules, the very, very, very complicated rules. So this is a general appeal that we are always giving to the legislator, but I know on the other side, when you are a legislator, there are so many special interests that play into the decision-making process. And of course, it's always a compromise. It's a compromise in Parliament, and it's a compromise between member states. And then at the end, a compromise between the member states and Council and Parliament. And such solutions will never be perfect, never be perfect. There will be always a compromise. So that's something that we are simply facing. On the other side, I think we have given, I remember this report 5 or 6 years ago, already a lot of concrete advices how people that have to deal with this should act. I think our specialists in the House, if they are asked, for example, to go to a seminary and to speak about the position of the Court of Auditors, they will be ready to do so. I don't see a difficulty regarding this activity. And of course, what we could think about, that we could think about in one of the next working programs to come back to this issue. So that's more or less what we can offer, but public procurement will remain a very, very, very difficult problem, and will be still one of the key sources for errors and difficult decisions. Yes. And indeed. What we as well could offer, we do not have the same like the European Court of Justice, where a national court or a regional court or whatever could ask for a preliminary rule. That's not existing, because all Supreme Audit institutions are completely independent. But if, for example, we get a request from a regional or national Supreme Audit institution to give an opinion on something, which of course will not be mandatory. They are still independent of what they do. I think our services will be ready to do so. So what we can support in an opinion building process, this kind of support, of course, will be delivered. We already said this quite often in contact committee meetings, that there is readiness to give this kind of support. They're already on specific aspects. I'm not sure if public procurement is covered by that, but on difficult aspects where national or regional audit offices have to deal with same area of decision making like we have to do. There are very often working groups on the contact group level that discuss things like that, and at the end try to find something at least like a common position or common idea how to deal with this and to have an exchange. In any case, on all reports that the national audit offices do and on the reports that we are doing, there is a permanent exchange between us and the national audit office. So they know what we are doing and we know what they are doing. Yeah. And my feeling is that's the experience over the last years. This works quite well. It was, of course, an interruption due to COVID, because we had no contact committee meetings since the COVID crisis. There have been, of course, still contacts, and sometimes there was here or there a virtual conference on liaison officer level, but we have now, since 1.5 years, I think in November, the first meeting of the leaders of the presidents again. And the most important thing that we have to discuss there, of course, is NGU and RRF. And then, of course, how we continue the next conference and things like that. But this will be the main issue, to restart with this kind of cooperation after the crisis. So that's what I can add. You want us? Okay, done.
Well, dear colleagues, it seems that we have had a very extensive debate. I believe that we had the opportunity to ask the most urgent questions, and we are grateful to the President for very extensive answers. Well, our time is up. We have to be strict when it comes to timing. So once again, thank you very much, Mr. President, for your visit and for the opportunity to meet with you. I know that we are planning to pay a visit to you, and we are very happy with the work of Rimantas Šadžius, because he always brings us up to date when it comes to the information related to the work of the European Court of Auditors. I was very happy to join this meeting. I'll finish at that. Mr. Balčytis, the floor is yours now. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's a pity that you were not able to participate in the meeting, but once again, let me reiterate my gratitude to the President, to wish every success in his endeavors, and to express the wishes of success to my colleague Rimantas Šadžius. Maybe finally everything will be very good. And I believe that today we have touched upon very important questions that were relevant both for the committee members that were here in the room and joined us online. We heard of the steps that are taken by the Court of Auditors to address the problems such as migration. So I'm thankful for that, and I hope that we will continue to cooperate in the future on the issues that are that fall within our competence.
Thank you very much. And of course, both committees are more than welcome if they visit us in Luxembourg. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. It's a very huge committee, you know.